that the Apostle Paul, student of Gamaliel, Hebrew of the Hebrews.
In Rabbi Gamaliel's writings, did he ever mention having Saul of Tarsus as a student, or mention Peter and the Christian community in Jerusalem?
No, of course not. It's very interesting. You say Paul of Tarsus. If you came from Tarsus, you would not be a student of Gamaliel. You would not be on the Sanhedrin. You wouldn't be a rabbi. Coming from Tarsus is like coming from Las Vegas. No, it's Tarsus essentially was one of three centers of Western reflection, Greco-Roman philosophical reflection. That's exactly where you would not be from. It's interesting that Jerome comments that he thinks that Paul was from the Galilee, and a lot of scholars wonder what compelled Jerome to suggest that the Tarsus thing. Incidentally, Paul never claims to be from Tarsus. Acts says that for Paul, but I mean the whole Gamaliel thing is Acts. It's not. Paul was now the reason why Paul would never say that in his letters is that if he said it, someone could have gone to Gamaliel and say, "Hey, there's this guy who's saying that he was in your class." Was he? But in '85, you could say anything you want to. You could say that Paul went to Harvard and graduated as a veterinarian. It wouldn't make a difference. At '85, the temple was destroyed, so Acts could say anything. He could say they were speaking in tongues, whatever you want. But no, there's no mention of anywhere. Gamaliel was the giant of the generation, and it was very important to attach Paul to the most illustrious Pharisaic sage of the generation. As it turns out, nothing works because Gamaliel, as in Acts, he is portrayed as someone who does not want to persecute Christians. So Paul was really a disciple of Gamaliel, and he was Gamaliel-like. What was he doing persecuting Christians? And why would he be working for the high priest and going to Damascus to persecute Christians? Like, are you insane? Like, the Jews have no problem. Like, we've got the Roman Empire to deal with. We got Caesar. We got problems, not Caesar. We have, we got emperors to deal with. We got wackos to deal with. We've got Caligula. You got Caligula as the emperor of Rome from 37 to 41. Christians in Syria are not your problem. So the whole story is nonsensical. And no, there is no mention of Paul being or Peter being a disciple of Rabbi Gamaliel. That's a claim made in the book of Acts. So he could not be a disciple of Gamaliel for 1,000 reasons. Let me go through why this is all patent nonsense. To begin with, we are told that Paul went to Damascus at the behest of the high priest to persecute Christians in Damascus. Along the way, the claim is made that Paul had these encounters, these supernatural encounters with Jesus, and he converts to Christianity. We're just going to use the word converts to Christianity because it's, I don't want anyone writing he didn't convert, he was doing it. Stop. Okay, we're going to use words that are just easy to work with. So the point is, hold the show. Who were the high priests in the time of Paul? Who controlled the priesthood? As it turns out, they were Sadducees. Sadducees were an elite group that were in cahoots with Rome that very much controlled the priesthood. They were enemies of the Pharisees. They were at war, spiritual war with the Pharisees, and therefore just think about this for a moment. Why would why would if Paul was a Pharisee of Pharisees, if that's the school he came from, which he does claim for himself, if he was what Acts says, that he was a student of Gamaliel, what is he doing working for a Sadducee? I mean, that's totally ridiculous. Number two, do you understand? I mean, that's like that's like saying that the chief rabbi is working for the Messianic movement. I mean, that's like ridiculous. I mean, that could not happen. Number two is the high priest would have no jurisdiction over what's going on in Syria. I mean, that's just patently ridiculous. Third thing is that the attitude of the Pharisees were not in any way threatened by Christians. That means they didn't want to kill Christians or harm them or persecute them. And in fact, this is even revealed in the Christian Bible. Think for a moment. If we go to Acts chapter 5, what do we encounter there? Peter is brought in front of Gamaliel, who we are told was the teacher of Paul. What is Gamaliel's attitude? I mean, if we are to believe that Paul was a disciple of Gamaliel and follow the teachings of Gamaliel, that could not be, because he would be a Tana, he would listen to Mishnah. He wasn't, that never happened. But let's just play make believe and let's go along with the story. What was the attitude of the Pharisees? The attitude of the Pharisees was very simple. Gamaliel says in the book of Acts, he says, look, don't harm Peter. Don't do anything to him. Why? Because remember, Peter in this early point is sort of teaching a Christianity, is a follower of Jesus, but he's still keeping kosher, keeping everything Jewish. So Gamaliel, we are told, tells him that, hey, those who brought Peter to Gamaliel, don't hurt him. Don't even try to stop him. Don't do anything to impede him. Don't persecute him. Leave him alone. So therefore, think about this for a moment. If in fact Paul came from the Welt Anschauung, from the worldview of Rabbi Gamaliel, what was he doing going to Damascus to persecute Christians? The attitude of Rabbi Gamaliel is don't persecute Christians. All this is absolute nonsense. He wouldn't be a member of the Sanhedrin. He wouldn't be persecuting. What would he do persecuting Christians in Damascus? Gamaliel and this type of outlook is don't persecute them. Besides the fact, what is he doing from Tarsus? And if you read Paul's letters in Greek, let's just say this, it's very simple. Paul was a highly literate Greek-speaking Christian. Okay, Jews from Jerusalem, Jews who were members of the Sanhedrin, Greek wasn't just another language. Greek was like German. Greek was the language of the Hellenists. It was the language of all those who were enemies of God. Just so you understand, those of you who are English speakers, it's not a simple matter to write because you're literate in English. I'm speaking to you Americans. So you're literate in English. You say, I speak English. But I'll ask you honestly, would you be able to write a highly literate rhetorical book of 16, of 10 chapters, of 13 chapters in English, well written? The answer is probably not. It'll be very difficult.
Another point that is important to realize over here is that the concept of the Trinity only came up after Christians already accepted the deity of Jesus. It was an effort, a philosophical effort to justify something they believed already, an absurdity they believed already. To believe a man is God, they had to come up with an idea of the Trinity. It wasn't that they first came up with the idea of the Trinity and then they said, oh, Jesus is the one that fits into the Trinity. Before Jesus came to the world, no one thought of the Trinity. So the Trinity is an excuse for idolatry.